Such meeting took place 3 years ago. Li Keqiang will later start his official visit there. President Moon Jae-in's visit to Tokyo marks the first trip to Japan by a South Korean leader since December 2011. The three leaders will meet the news media after their talks, and we will bring you live coverage of that when it happens. The White House says a leading Chinese official will visit the United States next week for more trade talks. It comes after a high-level delegation from the U.S. visited Beijing last week. The Chinese Foreign Ministry did not confirm any details, but welcomed the positive signal from Washington.
We have noted the White House statement that the U.S. is willing to make a consensus with China on trade is a positive sign. It's in the interest of both sides and the world to resolve our differences, deal with friction through consultation, and maintain the healthy and stable development of China-U.S. trade relations.
And a sign of those trade troubles with the U.S. new customs data shows falling levels of soybean imports into China. Volume fell 6.9 million tons in April, 13.7% lower than the same month last year. The unexpected decline came as Beijing threatened to slap an additional 25% import duty on soybeans from the United States. China imports 60% of its soybeans from overseas. A third of that is typically from the U.S. Stricter border inspections are believed to have delayed the clearing of soybean cargoes for about 2 weeks. However, the imports still rose compared to March, up from 5.7 million tons. The China National Grains and Oils Information Center said it expects more soybean arrivals in May and June. Analysts say the global supply of soybeans will tighten in the second half of the year if China implements extra tariffs on American soybeans. The third China-Africa Local Government Cooperation Forum kicked off on Tuesday in Beijing as one of the events scheduled within the framework of China-Africa Cooperation Forum. This year's meeting is scheduled to discuss finding new driving forces for sustainable development cooperation. Tang Bo has more.
Over 400 guests from China and Africa, all in search for better cooperation in sustainable development. Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan delivered an opening speech for the forum. He stressed that holding the meeting was in line with the expectations of China and Africa to strengthen exchanges and cooperation.
Economic globalization and building the community of shared future have become inevitable historical trends. China's development cannot be isolated from the world, and vice versa.
The Forum on China-Africa Local Government Cooperation has become a major platform for promoting practical cooperation from the local government level since its establishment in 2012. In the past 3 years, over 150,000 various types of African technicians were trained by China. China also offered government scholarships for more than 20,000 African students.
Local governments are in charge of local affairs. They are the major forces of combating poverty and realizing sustainable development. Local governments from China and Africa should share their governing experiences and learn from each other.
That was echoed by some African participants.
The model of development of China is a good one because they explained to us that in the past they began by a very big industrialization, and now they took some conscience that it's better to mix it with sustainable development.
From what China has done, we must come up with our own tailor-made development models based on the lessons we learn from China. Then it will be easy for us to sustain that which we are going to do.
The Forum on China-Africa Local Government Cooperation aims to integrate China's experience in poverty alleviation with Africa's local development. Under the framework of China-Africa Cooperation Forum, the meetings are expected to provide China and Africa with new driving forces for their sustainable development cooperation. Tambo, CGTN, Beijing.
China has deployed another highly specialized satellite as part of the country's efforts to observe the planet with greater clarity. Gaofen 5 was launched off the back of a Long March 4C rocket from the Taiyuan Satellite Launch Center in Shanxi Province on Wednesday morning. It is the world's first full-spectrum hyperspectral satellite and can provide high-resolution images of the atmosphere and land. It's also China's first homemade satellite capable of monitoring air pollution.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
In this episode, I head to Major Island for its Grand Mazu Festival and discover how a local girl became the object of worship for millions of Chinese around the world.
Malaysians head to the polls on Wednesday in what could be the closest election in the country's 6 decades of independence. Throughout that time, the main political party, UMNO, has ruled in alliance with others. But now, leader Najib Razak and his Barisan Nasional Alliance face a formidable opponent, the former UMNO Prime Minister of 22 years, Mahathir Mohamad. As Ryan Melter reports from Kuala Lumpur, the big question is whether Mahathir can draw enough support from the majority ethnic Malays to lead the opposition to victory.
He may be 92, but Mahathir Mohamad still has considerable pulling power and stamina. Over the past 10 days, he's hurtled around the country to plead with Malaysians to help oust the alliance he led for 22 years. The issues he's been hammering away at, like the unpopular goods and services tax and the alleged misuse of billions of dollars by the state investment firm 1MDB, strike a chord with many younger voters.
The thing that I would like addressed if a new government is in power is the GST, the rising cost of living, and numerous corruption scandals that's hit us.
The opposition Pakatan Harapan can expect to do well in urban areas and are again likely to sweep up the votes of non-Malays, especially ethnic Chinese.
It finally gives the opposition a chance to break into the conservative Malay heartlands. The electorate, which is the majority, which is crucial to finally, who have been reluctant to vote for the opposition. So it could be argued that Mahathir's presence there in the opposition will finally allow them to tap into these voters.
Prime Minister Najib Razak argues that his Barisan Nasional will best look out for the interests of ethnic Malays by preserving affirmative action policies and protecting Islam. The BN promises larger cash handouts for the lower income groups and a rise in the minimum wage. The opposition's manifesto promises to scrap the goods and services tax and unpopular road tolls, as well as to tackle corruption and abuse of power.
That is what will be decisive going into the elections. Which side has a more energized base? Who wants it more? Who's going to work harder for it?
There's one factor that makes the outcome particularly unpredictable. The Islamist party PAS, which was part of the opposition alliance in the last 2 elections, is now running against them and BN, effectively splitting the anti-BN vote.
And in the first past the post electoral system, that could allow Najib and BN to waltz back into power. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
Work has begun on the site of Taiwan tech giant Foxconn's new flat-screen production plant in southeast Wisconsin. 28 companies have signed on to carry out the preparatory ground-moving work. The $10 billion facility is expected to provide 13,000 jobs once it opens next year. CGTN's Dan Williams has more from Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin.
A busy afternoon of activity as the process of shaping the site for the new $10 billion Foxconn manufacturing complex gets underway. This farming area in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, is where the 20 million square foot campus will be based. The facility will become the first outside of Asia to build LCD screens. 28 construction companies have been awarded contracts totaling more than $100 million to prepare the ground for the building phase. All but one of those companies is from Wisconsin.
It's really the focus on Wisconsin first. Foxconn, and working with us in the first place, understood that was a priority for us. That's part of the reason why I had to be here, bringing together this Wisconsin first approach to make sure that we had an impact all across the state of Wisconsin.
Among the companies to have been chosen is Michaels, a transportation and utility contractor based in Brownsville, Wisconsin. They hope it's just the beginning of a building boom in the area.
There are large buildings and a lot of site work that have to get done in a very short period of time. So it's a way to showcase our talents to a wider audience. And I think people, if they see the success of Foxconn, they're going to say, hey, Wisconsin is a great place to do business.
Although a host of Wisconsin-based construction companies are set to benefit during the building phase of this huge facility, it's the long-term vision once the plant has been built that authorities here are most excited about.
The jobs themselves in and around Foxconn, so it's 13,000 direct jobs right on site at its peak when it's fully operational. We're essentially picking up and moving an entire city of jobs into the state. 13,000 jobs is bigger than 96% of all the municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. So we are literally moving a whole city's worth of workers making good pay, family supporting jobs here in the state.
Although construction work has begun, the official groundbreaking ceremony will only take place in a few months. But construction is expected to be rapid, with phase 1 of the facility set to open later next year. Dan Williams, CGTN, Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin.
Let's turn to Saudi Arabia now, a country rocked into recession by low oil prices last year, but pushing ahead with an ambitious economic reform program primarily aimed at weaning itself off its most valuable resource and staving off rising youth unemployment. For the second in a 5-part series, CGTN's Guy Henderson reports from Riyadh.
A world beyond oil. That's what's capturing the imagination of the House of Saud in this most conservative of nations. So, 40 kilometers outside Riyadh, what is now a barren landscape, soon to be transformed by royal decree into an entertainment metropolis, almost the size of Las Vegas. This is the tightly choreographed groundbreaking ceremony. There'll be theme parks, sports arenas, even safaris here. It's all a dramatic break with the past.
Qiddiya will enhance the kingdom's competitiveness to attract international investment and result in benefits to the Saudi economy and ultimately to its people.
The ambition of Vision 2030 is immense. A complete restructuring of the Saudi economy. Riyadh's half-built financial district has reportedly just become the latest project to come under the 2030 umbrella. Whole new sectors of the economy are being created. With them, it's hoped, will come hundreds of thousands of private sector jobs. And funds being put front and centre. Last month, public movie screenings returned in spectacular fashion after 35 years.
3, 2, 1, and action!
It's a giant leap for an industry that once worked mostly underground, and it's bringing new opportunities. We joined a company called 80 Studios as they shot this World Cup football music video for a major sponsor. 80s was founded 4 years ago on a shoestring budget when scenes like this just wouldn't have been possible.
Arabia's desert sands have long been known for their huge oil reserves, perhaps less so for their ability to entertain. But 80's rise has tracked the significant changes taking place across this country right now. We're talking big budgets, 50-man crews, high-end equipment.
The CEO says the entertainment sector is being transformed.
There was no one with the relevant skills or equipment to do the job in Saudi Arabia before, so any work there was done by non-Saudis. When one taught this change, we had to learn it ourselves. This will all change now.
Beneath the old guard is a generation pushing new limits. High on optimism, high on expectation. Guy Henderson, CGTN, Riyadh.
Argentina's economy continues to struggle with inflation and a significant fiscal deficit, even though Mauricio Macri's government has been widely lauded for its pro-businesses policies. CGTN's Joel Richards has more on the situation from Buenos Aires.
The Buenos Aires Book Fair, taking place this month, is one of the most important literary events in the Spanish-speaking world. The three-week festival generates a welcome boost in sales for publishing houses. But this is a sector that is struggling in Argentina's faltering economy.
Bookshops are the most affected. They have high running costs with tariffs going up and other costs. The sector is not doing well, but editors are used to these ups and downs, and we try to keep going.
According to the Argentine Book Chamber, sales have dropped 30% since 2015. This sector and many other sectors of the Argentine economy are facing difficulties with inflation and rising gas and electricity bills. The government is removing long-standing subsidies to reduce the fiscal deficit. But tariff hikes for consumers and business are adding to inflation. The government's aim is for 15% inflation this year, but most analysts expect a figure of over 20%. And dramatically, as emerging markets suffered the US dollar's rise last week, Argentina was one of the worst hit. The peso is now the worst performing currency in the region this year, and the central bank adjusted interest rates 3 times, up to 40%, to prevent a further slide in the currency, presenting yet more problems for Mauricio Macri's economic team. Former Finance Minister Guillermo Nielsen is concerned by the increasing level of debt Argentina has accumulated in the past 2 years, as well as the government's response last week.
All economic crises are serious, but of course Argentina's situation is far better than what it was in 2001. But nevertheless, each crisis has its own complexities, and this is not out of the chart. That is, the current crisis is also very risky for Argentina. This needs to be solved, and the government needs to move forward at very high speed, which is not doing it.
With the memory of the 2001 economic crash still fresh, businesses and consumers face not only higher prices, but also growing uncertainty about what lies ahead. Joel Richards, CGTN, Buenos Aires.
Australia's agriculture industry is serving as a technology incubator to test new systems designed to benefit farmers around the globe. From pepper-picking robots to smart tractors, those technologies share a common goal: making farming more efficient and more profitable. Greg Navarro explains from Toowoomba in Queensland State.
Having grown up on a farm, Craig Bailey knows his way around the inside of a tractor. But unlike the traditional mechanical workhorse, this vehicle doesn't need a driver. And more importantly, it has the ability to think about its surroundings.
Essentially what we can do is tap into the electronics on this machine and control any feature or function.
Bailey and a team of agricultural engineers at the University of Southern Queensland have created a technology incubator with an eye on farming. They're working with multinational companies to develop new systems that can be applied to farms around the world. Bailey says Australia is the perfect test site.
Our farmers tend to operate in unprotected markets, and so obviously pressured by world prices that are fairly low without subsidy. And so what it means is that farmers generally here in this country tend to be more innovative. They tend to have a greater thirst for technologies.
This tractor is being fitted with a system that allows it to water crops on its own. It can reflect on the job it's just done and figure out what adjustments need to be made to become more efficient.
There's another advantage to Australian farmers in all this, and that's a lot of the technology being developed in this country is being created for their specific geographic needs. meaning ultimately they'll be able to maximize the benefits from that technology once it's available.
We know that we operate in a slightly different climate to everybody else, and yet if we're receiving technologies that have been developed in other parts of the world, then they still need to go through that development phase to be able to be used here. And so by getting first access to those technologies, you can have input into how that will then inform what you want it to do on farm.
This platform we call Harvey, the capsicum harvester. We're not good at naming systems here.
What Chris Leonard and other researchers at the Queensland University of Technology are highly skilled at is creating robotic technologies. Harvey does just what its name suggests. It harvests fruit autonomously. While it may appear to replace human workers, Leonard says Harvey can solve a much broader problem.
We're actually struggling to keep farmers in the jobs as well. So growers and farmers are struggling at the bottom line about how much it costs them to grow fruit. And really we're trying to give it back to stabilizing that industry, the agricultural industry.